Welcome back to another episode of Trading Secrets. Today we are joined by entrepreneur, real estate agent, podcast host, and reality TV star Savannah Chrisley. Over the past 10 years, Savannah and her family gained recognition for their rapid success from their hit reality show, Chrisley Knows Best. Everyone knows that show. With over 200 episodes and several successful TV spinoffs, including Growing Up Chrisley, which featured Savannah and her brother as the stars of the show. Since then, Savannah leveraged her reality TV success with various entrepreneurial endeavors, including starting her own personal beauty brand, hosting her own podcast, which I was just on, go check it out, and starting her own luxury realty company here in Nashville. I'm going to need some real estate, so we're going to talk. Although her career accolades have proven Savannah's ability to succeed in whatever she puts her mind to, she has had to endure it all through unique personal struggles, from those close to her, including her parents being sent to prison for tax evasion, and the tragic passing of her ex-fiancé. So today we are going to discuss what motivates Savannah on a daily basis and what she does to stay positive and focused through growing professionally and personally during these tough times. Savannah, thank you so much for being on Trading Secrets.
Thank you for having me.
You got a lot of action going on here.
Hey, I like to say if I didn't have bad luck, I would have no luck at all. So
I like that. If you haven't had bad luck, you would have no luck. Well, let's talk about the fact that you entered the public spotlight over a decade ago, right? Through that, you have been subjected to so much. I think when you enter the public spotlight, so much gets put on your shoulders. On top of that, you've had loss. There's been criminal things that have happened that you're aware of. Alleged criminal activity, right? Alleged. We'll talk about that. But you've seen a lot. Now you're parenting. You're a businesswoman. You're dealing with all this. I would just say, let's just start with this mentally. Where are you right now? How are you?
Oh, I'm okay. I feel like I'm my therapist says high functioning depression. Yeah. It's a real thing. And I would say that's kind of the category that I fall in. I'm very high functioning. I'm always go, go, go. Enough is never enough for me personally. I just hold myself to a certain standard that I'm I can always do better.
Okay.
But I think with that comes a lot of success because you're always expecting more for yourself. But I have to find the balance of accepting my little wins and seeing them for what they are and rejoicing in them instead of just saying, it could always be better. But for me, I would say every few months I hit a wall and I'm I have one day where I just fall apart. And I'm it's all just a lot. I need to feel my emotions. And then I get up the next day and I go.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that you keep going through it because obviously the highs of highs, but some of the lows of lows as I'm doing the research for the podcast, right? Both parents are in prison right now, your ex-fiancé. And then I just keep reading. I'm I feel like I'm watching a movie. The gentleman you're dating now, his ex had a hit on him. I'm you can't make this up. Yeah. Your life kind of is a movie. Have you ever, career direction, business-wise, have you ever thought about making your life a Lifetime show?
Hey, it really could be. I look at it and I'm I have thought about it. I have, especially with my parents' stuff, that in itself is a legitimate movie. It just how everything went down, the whole process over almost 10 years of them being investigated. It could be a Lifetime movie. It could be a show. God only knows what it will turn into, honestly.
Would you sell the rights to this show?
Heck yes, I would.
So you're ready to roll.
I'm ready to roll.
Okay. Well, let's take it a few steps back to when you started reality TV.
15.
So, 15 years old, Chrisley Knows Best. You guys create the show, and what I read is you put it out to 10 networks, 9 made an offer, right?
It's the only time to this day it has ever happened. To this day.
That 9 networks out of 10 made an offer.
Yes.
That's extremely rare.
Yeah.
When you guys came up with the idea, how did this even come about?
It was a friend of my dad's who I think he actually was sitting next to someone on a plane or somehow he got into business with this lady. And then she was you guys need a show. And she was a producer. My dad was no, grew up very similar to you on we keep all of our dirty laundry behind closed doors. Yep. You walk out your door, you put a smile on your face, no one knows about it. And so my older half brother from my dad's first marriage, bipolar, drugs, the whole 9 yards. And so my dad was no. We're not doing this. The world's not going to see those things. And then finally he was all right, we'll film a pilot for it.
Okay.
And we didn't expect anything to really come from it. And then 9 out of 10 networks wanted it. And we were kind of shocked because, you just look at it as like, okay,
we're
it's
just a
your
family.
life. Yeah.
We just recorded something.
And so the highest bidder was Oprah's network at the time for I want to say it was 12, 14 hour long episodes. And for that to be your first run, that's a big ask. But we ended up going with USA.
I mean, Trading Secrets, I got to ask, Oprah, the highest bidder. Can you share how much that was?
I was so young at the time. I don't remember really.
Yeah. If you had to guess, what do you think?
I really don't know. I know later on what I was making because obviously after 18, I'm responsible for my own finances.
Yeah.
So back then, I don't know. And as you know, the first few seasons, you don't make a ton.
Much, right?
You don't you have to prove that you're kind of here to stay.
Sure.
In TV. So that was a gray area. Yeah.
Bethany Frankel has come out very aggressively talking about how there needs to be reform with reality TV, especially for children. Being 15 going into reality TV, looking back on compensation, mental impact, all those things. What's your take on that?
There should, on the production side of things, network side of things, there should be encouragement for therapy. There should be those services offered. There should be more oversight.
Yeah.
Because, and I think it's very hypocritical because these same networks and these same people that want to preach mental health and we agree with all these things, they're doing nothing to help with your mental health.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really tough thing, especially when you have minors on television and how it impacts the rest of their life and things that are said. And to you, unfortunately, you are just a dollar to these networks. You can think they care about you, but they don't. They care about the paycheck that they're making and what they need to do to get that paycheck. So I definitely think there needs to be some sort of reform, but that's also been done. I mean, financially, it's been done with, what occurred with Macaulay Culkin and having Coogan accounts for minor children and things of that nature. So you're protecting their money more, but you're doing nothing to protect their mental health whatsoever.
So that's interesting, right? So the money's being protected, the mental health isn't. You have had quite a journey. We're going to step into that. But let's talk about 15 to 18, when the money is coming in the door for you. How is that working? Are the checks being sent to you? Do you have your own bank account at this point? Who's managing it? How are you doing that 15 to 18?
So I know it's part of it gets sent to a Coogan account, which you can't touch till you're 18. Then part of it went to our production, the production company that my parents had, Seven Seas Productions, and we all of us were part owners of it, so it all ran through. It all had to go to this one loan out company to then be paid out to us. But, that's how it works. Loan out companies are very in the entertainment world, everyone has a loan out company. So that's just how it had to be done then. And so we would get money and I spent money as fast as it came in, it went out. That's for sure.
All right, stay tuned to the recap. We'll talk about what a loan out company is. We'll get into the details of that. But one thing that's different is The Bachelor, a lot of reality shows that we've had on, Vanderpump, you name a show, we've had someone on from it. They're all working in a way that they are cast, they are paid per episode. We don't ever see the financials. We don't know the numbers that are coming in. Given the fact that it was your family show, were you subjected, did you know, obviously you knew ratings, but did you know what the show was grossing versus what you were being paid? Were you exposed to the numbers at all?
So I think my parents were.
Okay.
Because my dad's contract was very different. It was even agents at William Morris said they had never seen a contract structured that way.
Specifically what?
He was obviously executive producer and very early on. So he was executive producer, also got, part of the back end side of things.
For the show's performance. Yeah. So you guys had actual equity in the show.
Yeah.
That's so rare. Interesting.
Yeah. So the contracts were structured very differently. There was also a partnership with the production company. So it was very complex, his side of things. Because obviously he was the reason the show was so successful. Yeah. Dad was the main person of the show. So his contract was very complex.
Okay, branding wise, I always like to ask this. Dad off show, you off show, cameras are on. How similar was it? Was it extra magnified just to get the ratings going, branding wise?
No. My dad, he is what he is he's got a big, larger than life personality.
Yeah.
Like, he's hilarious. When it came to parenting, he was hardcore. He had high expectations. But, you know, for TV, they love to have some things exaggerated,
Sure.
or they would, different from your experience, they would be like, say this, say that. And finally we got to a point where we're like, this is a scripted comedy. And if you want this to be a scripted comedy, then pay us what scripted actors get paid.
Okay.
You don't get both.
What do scripted actors get paid?
I mean, scripted actors get paid a hell of a lot more than reality television.
How would you
I mean,
have any
you look
idea
at
or
like
no?
Yellowstone.
Okay.
Like, look at actors on Yellowstone.
Yeah.
They're making $250,000 an episode.
Right,
Some of
exactly.
them. Like,
yeah.
the lower cast members.
Sure.
And so you look at that, and you're not making that in reality television.
No. All right. Talk to me about this. When they sign you the first time, is it a 1-year deal, 1-season deal?
I want to say it was 2.
Okay.
Yeah,
2-season deal.
Which you don't get either.
Okay. So you're 50. Yeah, that's right too. So 15, 17, can you share like on an episodic basis what you were making then?
I don't know. I think at that time, I don't know, $4,000 to $7,000
An episode.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So then 2 years comes up. How the hell do you, like, what is your basis for negotiating? Like, how do you go to dad and be like, hey, dad, pay me more? I was a star. Like, how does the process of the business negotiating work?
So it's always been tough, especially being in business with your family.
Yeah.
Like, my parents never wanted money to come between their children.
Of course.
So that was a tough thing, because if I'm looking at it and I'm like, all right, numbers wise, like, I should be getting dad and then me. Like, I should be getting paid the second highest salary. But that never happened, just because it was, and I get it, because like with all my siblings, you don't want that friction when it comes to money. Like, no relationship is worth losing over money.
Right.
It's just not.
Exactly.
So that was the tough part. And then, you know, it was a lot easier with the spinoff, because it was just my brother and I.
Yeah.
So we obviously got paid a lot more for that.
Okay. Jersey Shore, they say that they have, I forgot the exact term, we had Angelina on, but they essentially have a pool union where they go in together and negotiate, and they're all paid the same per episode. And it's massive. It's a big dollar amount.
What is it?
It's 6 figures.
That's wild.
Crazy, right?
Wild.
So,
I didn't get paid that.
but did you ever, like, so is that what the deal was with you and your siblings? You were paid the same?
Yeah.
Okay. Was that a
I
little,
would not do that again.
Did that create a little contention from your standpoint?
Yes,
Because
for
you
sure.
you were the star.
Like, with a show like ours, it wouldn't be our show if it wasn't for all of us.
Yeah.
Because we all gave something that was special and unique. And so I don't ever like to say, I'm just a numbers based person.
Yeah.
So when I look at like social media followings and things of that nature, I'm like, okay, like, come on.
Pay the girl.
Yeah. So that's kind of, you know, you obviously you have resentment when you're filming a show that involves everyone.
Yep.
And then you see people not showing up their best, not putting the best foot forward, not, you know, going out partying the night before and then showing up to try to film the next day.
Yeah.
Like, there's resentment that builds because you're like, I'm showing up the best version of myself and doing my job. I need you to do the same.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Fascinating. All right. So you said about 4 to 7K, let's say, per episode when you started. Can you share what the most you made per episode was?
30.
30 per episode.
Yeah.
Okay. When you think
A week.
30 a week.
Because we filmed an episode a week.
Okay. So it's just 30 a week. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So when you think about that number.
And we got to where we were filming 30 episodes.
So you could do the math.
Yeah.
That's a great year.
Yeah.
And how old are you at this point?
Well, it just depends. I say that, but then, because there were 2 different shows. So like what we got paid for each were different on the shows. Like, I got paid more on the spinoff than I did Chrisley Knows Best. So, and the spinoff was only 10 episodes, I think.
Okay.
10, 12 episodes a season. So I would say I was 20.
Yeah, so you're 20 years old,
Yeah.
grossing over 7 figures
Yeah.
from reality TV.
Yeah.
And on top of it, having other income sources. How did you manage that inflow?
Oh, I didn't. I did not.
What do you mean?
I did
Tell me
not.
more.
I just think,
But $1 million at 20.
yeah.
Like, that's unheard of. So when you say you didn't, what did you do? Spend it all?
Yeah.
On what?
I think for me, and it goes back to the mental health side of things. If I would have been better equipped to deal with everything that the world had coming at me from reality television, I probably wouldn't have spent my money the way that I did, because there was this huge amount of hurt within me that I'm like, all right, and so I don't have to feel this. Let me surround myself with all these outside, distractions. And I think for me, that's what it was just, and when you're 20 years old and you get money, you're like, and before that, you got to keep in mind, my dad filed for bankruptcy back in 2012, I think it was. Yeah. And so I watched my family go from dad making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in real estate and living in a 30,000 square foot house to now them struggling to pay the bills every month in a 5,000 square foot house. Now, it's all relative. 5,000 square foot house is what I live in now. Like, it's a very nice way of living. So it's not to say but it's all relative. When you go from 30,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet, it's all relative. But I still watch my parents struggle and like, all right, how are we going to pay our bills? How are we, and that's when the show came about. Got it. And so with seeing that, like, I went from having everything, and then there was a time to where it's like, you struggled to get what you need. And so when I got my money on my own like that, I was just like, I was living in the Gulch. I moved out at 17. I lived in the nicest high rise you could live in Nashville. I was just living life up.
What do you think that when you look back at that time, what is the most outrageous thing that you bought, and what was the cost of it?
I don't really know. I mean, first, a 20-year-old living in a $3,600 a month apartment is probably outrageous. Yeah. Like, definitely outrageous.
But even for millions of dollars a year, that's still immaterial, right? $40K a year.
But I also think that and cars.
Okay.
Like cars.
What was your go-to car?
I don't know. I had like a Mercedes AMG S63. Like,
interesting. Oh, you were
real sporty.
That would probably, I think that's the one. All right. Knowing what you know now about money and finances, and now even parenting, and we'll talk a little bit about that, how you like deal with the finances of that. What is one lesson you would have told yourself back then? Savannah, don't do this and do this financially.
Oh, invest and save.
Okay.
Definitely invest, because you look at it and you're like, if I would have put away $500 a month or just something tiny, you don't realize 10 years from now what that could look like. Yeah. Or investing in a company, and for me, it was just, you don't have to do all these things or pay for all these things in order to be accepted. And if you do, then you're hanging out with the wrong crowd of people.
Sure.
And so I think for me, I just wish I would have invested better, because now I'm almost 27 years old, and it's like, all right, I'm starting over.
Yeah. One of the things I think about too is like career trajectory. Like this world, there's so many fluxes, right?
Well, I thought it was never going to end.
Well, that was going to be my question. So you're 20 years old. At this point, you didn't go to college, right?
Well, I was in college, but it was very hard for me because I was paying for my own college education, which was like $50,000 a year, $60,000 a year at like Lipscomb and Belmont.
With the earnings from the show.
So in my mind, I was like, I can already pay, like I'm paying $60,000 a year to go to college. Why am I doing this?
Okay. So you dropped out then.
Yeah.
How much money did you lose going to college, not finishing your degree?
Oh, probably $100,000.
Okay. Got it. And so in your career mind, 20 years old, what did it look like? You thought what was going to happen for Savannah?
I just thought, honestly, I thought my career was going to blow up. I was going to be set for life. I was going to be fine. But unfortunately, fortunately, I'm not the type to like go out here. I'm not going to be half clothed. I'm not going to like sell my soul to make money. And in our world, you kind of have to. You kind of have to like be half naked and to get all these followers. And I just wasn't willing to do that. And if I would have been willing to do that, I'd have millions.
Understood. So you finished the show though. Your highest payment point is $30K a week. and you have all these millions of followers.
Yeah.
Are you able to monetize? Like a lot of shows, they will take a percentage of your monetization because the show created your following. They have restrictions. Could you monetize full speed with your social media while filming? So there were no restrictions with that.
No, they wanted to.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't allow it.
You said no.
We knew we were in a very fortunate position because we knew how valuable we were to the network.
Yeah.
Our show, not only was it pitched to 9 out of 10 networks, or 10 networks and 9 wanted them, but there was a bidding war between USA, E, and Bravo.
Okay.
And finally, like the head of NBC stepped in and said, we're bidding against ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to make the final decision. It's going to go on USA and then it's going to rerun on E and Bravo.
Interesting.
So it was on all 3 networks.
Do you get paid on reruns?
No.
No. Okay. So interesting. If you were making $30K, I'm speculating, but I gotta assume
my dad was
your dad's
making
making
six figures,
$100K a week off the show. Mm-hmm. Holy smokes!
I know. Yeah, they were.
Damn, they're rolling it in.
So
okay.
we knew how profitable we were to the networks.
Yeah.
So we basically, when I came out with my cosmetic line, they were wanting a percentage of it, or else they weren't going to film it.
Sure.
And my dad basically told them to go F themselves and said that they could watch us. They could sit and film us playing a damn board game and see how,
entertaining
comedic that is. And they finally just folded.
They folded. And then
we knew we could say we're walking.
Yeah.
And they couldn't afford that to happen.
This is unprecedented, though. I think this is extremely rare for a family to have back end, getting paid what you guys are getting paid, and then be able to do integration rights with brands. That is an extremely rare thing within the reality TV space. Yeah. But I also think that connects to how much leverage that you guys had based on the value that you were bringing because of the ratings.
Yeah.
The ratings were popping off. Was there ever a point that you guys were going to leave USA? Like, did you have another network knocking on your door?
There were always people that wanted it, wanted our show. I feel like USA at that time was a great partner for us, especially USA had never been successful in reality television. Yeah. And so we had an opportunity to come in and be the face of the network. Mm-hmm. And so it was always a great relationship until it wasn't. Until the indictment happened. Not even the indictment. They actually signed on for another season after the indictment.
Interesting.
And so they had full faith in our family and the success. And then when mom and dad were found guilty at trial, that's when USA were just like, bye. And it was not pretty. But at the same time, they dropped all advertisements. Like, they were not advertising for our show at all. And this is when season 10 was about to air, and our show was still in the top 10 highest rated shows on cable television without any money put behind advertising.
Interesting. Okay, I want to take a pause here because we're going to go to before and after. I have to hit a few things before the show is canceled. When you talk about social media monetization, were you making more being on the show as a cast at $30K a week, or were you making more off your social media?
I would say it was probably the same.
Okay.
Like, I would say it's so hard with how the show filmed and like in between seasons and years, and half the season in 1 year, half in the other year. So I would say it was fair to say, like, I don't know, $800,000 a year was like a fair amount to say that I made. Okay. But I mean, I wasn't keeping track of it, until I was.
Yeah. So at this point, you're making millions of dollars and you have the family CPA doing your accounting work. I remember when I first stepped into this world of 1099 contracting, like the idea of like keeping up with taxes was a lot. For you, was someone like helping you manage all of this?
I wasn't doing any of it.
Okay.
I was not. I had a CPA doing it who spoke to networks and who all the 1099s got sent to, and I did not touch a single thing. Okay, so from a tax perspective, you're not touching anything, but you also don't have someone that's like financially managing you, giving you an allowance. So that was probably that was the issue. That was the issue. Yeah. And I think if there was some way to enforce that, especially amongst minors in the TV world,
that's a good idea.
That would make a lot more sense and would allow people to be a lot more successful long term.
Yeah, well,
if that was forced.
Especially in America, you look at like the average household salary is in the 50 to 60K range.
Yeah.
And now you're an 18-year-old, 19-year-old making that in a week on a basis.
Yeah.
Like, how could you be prepared? You couldn't be prepared.
Not at all.
One thing I got to ask you, we talk a lot about social media monetization. And what they say is your brand really connects to what your rate is. Not necessarily following your engagement, your brand. There was a big agent that came on and he's CEO of Viral Nation. He came on saying G-rated personalities will always make more than R-rated personalities because of liability risk is what he was saying. Now, to your point with your eye roll, G-rated personalities will make more from a Fortune 500, but the R-rated personalities, of course, can go in other directions, OnlyFans, etc., and then make millions and millions of dollars. For you, after everything happened, there had to be a ripple effect to your brand, and you speak out openly about this. How has that impacted your monetization, being so outspoken about something that has created so much controversy?
Oh, for a year, I made nothing.
Really?
Nothing.
What year was that?
This was, I would say it started at the indictment. So really for years, I mean, starting in 2019, it was August 13th, 14th, 2019 is when my parents were formally indicted. So it hits the news, all of that. Immediately started losing deals.
Okay.
And then probably at about mid 2020 to the end, things started picking up a little bit. And then when they were found guilty, everything stopped for literally a year, I would say, almost.
What do you think drove the ability to pick it back up?
My honesty and transparency.
Interesting. I think that's a good trading secret for people back home.
Yeah.
Like the more honest and transparent, whatever it is that you do, that will always supersede everything else.
That was the biggest thing for me was, all right, I'm not going to get on here and fake it. I'm not going to act like my life is perfect. I'm not going to act like I'm sitting on millions of dollars. I'm not going to portray this image to people. That is not me.
Yeah.
And so when I came out about that, and I would say especially in the past few months when I've been very, very outspoken, I mean, you look at the numbers on my Instagram, like, because, you know, that's what we go off of in this world.
Of course.
And you see a video of mine, like, I don't think now I get a video that's less than 1.5 million views.
Yeah.
And it's just because people crave that honesty and transparency. And I think people are just tired of where our country is at and where it's going. And they just want something to believe in, and they want someone to finally tell the truth.
So do you make more money now based on creator programs? Because like Snapchat and stuff and in TikTok, they will pay per view and you don't have to actually have a brand deal. Like, are you getting paid off that in addition to the ad revenue?
So if I'm being honest, I am the worst at social media.
Okay.
The absolute
worst. Well, you're good at social media.
Yeah. I mean, I'm good at it.
Yeah.
But like
not monetizing it.
So TikTok, I really have barely used. And everyone's been like,
what do you do?
Get on TikTok.
Yeah.
Get on like I'll occasionally post a video and they're like, you got 3 million views on this TikTok video. Like, what are you doing?
That would pay, based on what I know about the Creator Fund, that would pay about $7.5K just for putting the video up there.
Well, why aren't you helping me?
Well, we'll change that. So Savannah's producers here just told us that Savannah did not know that she has a TikTok with 300,000 followers. Do you know how much money you can make off that?
No.
A lot.
Okay, well, you're gonna.
Okay, we're gonna make you a lot of money off that. Okay, interesting.
So
wow.
That's the thing is, I haven't done a great outside of Instagram.
Yeah.
I haven't done a great job at monetizing anything.
Interesting. It's funny. It's like there's this interesting business dichotomy here that you have this brand that's such a pop that generates so much value and money, but on your back end, you haven't found the way to like make that life changing for yourself.
But I also think it's really hard because I'm so outspoken and I have such a personality of just like, I like to try to go by the mindset of like, love people well. I use my social media as a place for people to see that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to see the struggle. It's okay. Like, I pour my heart out on Instagram.
Yeah.
So it's at times I forget about the monetization side of it.
Interesting. So does money motivate you?
Yeah.
It does.
It does. But if I have learned anything throughout this whole experience of like my ups and downs in life, I've realized that like money means nothing if you don't have the people you love with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so right now I look at money. I don't have a love for money like I previously had.
Okay.
Now I view money as a means to survive and to provide for the people I love. Now, that's not to say I don't have goals. Like, trust me, I would love, like, all right, let me have a place in the Cayman Islands. Let me have a place like in New York. I want all the finer things out of life, but it means nothing if you don't have the people you love with you.
That's true. I think that's a good segue to even talking about that. Do you at all view money connected to just like toxic filth and disgust, just because it is a financial crime that put your parents in prison? Like, what is your relationship with money, knowing that it's money that doesn't have you with the loved ones that you just said?
I don't think it's so easy for people to look at money and say, oh, money is the root of all evil. Yeah. Because a lot of people use that excuse in order to justify their lack of working for it. Because it takes a lot of time, grit, and energy to make money.
True.
So a lot of people use the excuse of, oh, money is evil, money is this, just because you haven't reached that level yet.
Yeah.
And I just believe money showcases more of who you are.
Right.
And so for me, I would love to have the money to, if someone said they're struggling, for me to be like, here you go.
Yeah.
Like, let me go pay off your house. Let me go pay off your car. That's the heart that I have. So that's why I love money, for those reasons, because it allows you to be a vessel for other people or to help other people and be a contributing member to society. Yeah. So I don't really have a negative, honestly, I view my parents' situation as an injustice and in our system as a whole. I don't have I don't relate it to money. I just relate it to how we live in what's supposed to be the greatest nation on earth. And it's one of the most corrupt systems in the world.
You've talked a lot about the injustice with your parents. Yeah. And I think knowing what you know and what they know now about what happened from a financial standpoint, what do you think they would have done differently?
Oh, what do I think
because I think in these situations, right, like wrong or right, guilty or non-guilty, injustice or justice, there's always probably a learning lesson that could have avoided it.
I think for them, it was, they were just so comfortable. Yeah. And, my dad created a business and he was making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. And when he got to that point, he basically, he had a guy by the name of Braddock who was helping him run the business. Okay. And this guy really was, for all intents and purposes, running the business, because dad had built it up. Then he had hired people and dad was like, all right, as long as he got his money, he knew he was supposed to get every month, he didn't worry. He didn't think anything was going on. Yeah. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, there was so much illegal activity going on that he didn't find out about until years later. Right. So for him, it was to not get comfortable in where you're at and stop asking the hard questions and stop doing the things that led you to that dollar amount.
Interesting.
And I think that's what a lot of people do. Once you reach this goal, you forget about all the things you did to get to that goal.
Right.
And that's where you can have a downfall.
Interesting. So with the case, when they talk, there's some like investigative reports out there that talk about wire fraud and falsifying documents to banks and things like that. What is your take on what happened then? So
what a lot of people don't know is the government's key witness was Braddock, my dad's former business partner, who got full immunity from the government. And when you talk about a $36 million fraud scheme is what the media likes to portray it as. Our lawyer says it best. He's like, you never see full immunity given. Yeah. You just don't see that. You may see like, all right, we'll give you less time. You won't have a harsher sentence, all these things, but you don't get full immunity. He got full blanket immunity for everything. So he sat on the stand at trial and said, I falsified their names to documents. I falsified documents. I was in their emails. I, was on the phone acting like I was Todd. He admitted to committing all these crimes, but his fallback was they knew about it. And so that's what a lot of people don't realize is this man got full immunity all because the government wanted to go after people that they thought they could make an example out of.
Interesting. So the first question I'm going to say is why give him full immunity? And you think because the repercussions of your mother and father dealing with the sentence is so great that it makes more impressions?
Yes, it makes more impressions. It also these federal prosecutors wanted to create a name for themselves. They wanted to, this was the biggest case of their career.
Yeah.
And this was their chance to kind of blow it up.
So how did they actually then prove that he did know about it? The business partner, Mark, comes in and says he did everything. Yep. Falsified the documents, signed everything. He committed every crime.
Yeah.
But his whole take was that your parents knew about it. How do you prove in a state of law and court that your parents knew about it? How were they able to prove that?
Unfortunately, you don't have to. You don't have to. And that's part of on our appeal that we filed, especially on my mom's appeal, was that her name wasn't on a single bank loan. So how do you go down for 7 counts of bank fraud, but your name's not on a single loan? That's
pretty wild. Your mom's name wasn't on one bank loan.
Not on a single bank loan. And the government's own witnesses got on the stand and said they were bankers. And they said, we never met Miss Chrisley. She's never given us a document. There was not an email.
Did she have to? Because I think I was in the banking industry. You'd have to underwrite the person. And you say, like, as bankers, when I was a banker, right, we're underwriting based on the information we're provided. So we're lending money, assuming that the information we're getting is correct.
Yes.
If the information is getting correct, we know we're taking inherent risk on. With that risk, we price it appropriately. So then the fraud comes into play. When someone gives information that's inaccurate, we're then lending money not knowing, right, the liability. But if her name wasn't even on the bank loan, nor did she sign for it, I'm very bewildered as to how that occurred.
And that is one of our biggest arguments, especially for her, because she's now sitting in prison for 7 years. And her name wasn't on a single bank loan. And so that's the really tough part. And especially too, because you have Mark Braddock saying he accessed my parents' emails. He would get in their emails, send an email to himself, then go in and delete it. He would do it at really random times because he knew they wouldn't be on him. Like he has a background in forensic technology, all these different things. So he knew how to kind of finagle things. And he submitted false information to banks because he was stealing from the company. So he had to make sure the company's financials looked like the company was doing great.
Sure.
Even though he was stealing millions of dollars from the company.
Interesting.
So even these bankers that got on the stand said, yeah, Mark Braddock was the one who always he provided us with all the documents.
Interesting. That is because the number one thing we would see in fraud with banking is if financial documents were, if there was any type of fraud, it would show up in the finances.
Yes.
So then you'd have to falsify financial documents to get away with the fraud. But even then, there's different ways to kind of navigate that. So did your parents plead guilty then?
No.
Okay.
They went to trial.
So they go to trial. And on what basis? Like if I went and got ripped through the court documents, which I'm sure you've done over and over, on what basis were they convicted then? Just the standpoint from Mark saying this is what they did?
That was the government's key witness. So with the way that the trial happened, it was a 4-week trial. They started off the trial. And again, this is just, I always say everyone's political beliefs are their beliefs. They believe what they believe for their own reasons.
Yep.
And you have valid reasons for believing that. And for our family, grew up in the South, very conservative. And our case was in Fulton County, Georgia. The prosecutor started off our trial by stating, ladies and gentlemen, what we have here are the Trumps of the South. And that obviously did not go over well in Fulton County, Georgia, and the most Democratic county in the state. And so we knew at that point, like, okay, this is not going to be good. And then they started off with tax fraud is what they were alleging. And they used the tax fraud case in order to build their bank fraud case because they needed to create this image of these entitled people who live a luxurious life, who don't think they need to pay the government. And because they don't pay the government, you're now suffering. You jurors are now suffering because you work every day and you pay taxes, but these people think they don't have to, which all was a complete lie. And after trial, which is part of our appeal, the IRS agent on the stand admitted that her exact words were, what I said actually wasn't accurate. They don't owe anything. This was after my parents were found guilty.
Yeah.
And so her testimony was all false. The prosecutors knew it was false, and my parents didn't owe anything. And
so at one point they did, though, right? So at one point there were back taxes with the state of Georgia, which they paid, right?
Yeah, but the reason being is because my dad had filed for bankruptcy, and it was a very lengthy bankruptcy. It went on a year and a half. I think at least a year and a half. And while you're in bankruptcy, there's nothing you can do.
Correct.
You can't file tax.
Everything has to be settled out.
Everything. You're in bankruptcy court.
But I read that so your parents settled their Georgia state tax evasion, agreeing to pay. It was $147,944. And so that was an agreed amount that was paid back then.
Yeah, but they alleged that over it was $1 million or $2 million that weren't paid in taxes to the state of Georgia, and they settled for $100,000.
Interesting.
Like, that math isn't mathing.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing is they took things that did occur.
Yeah.
Like real things, bankruptcy, back taxes, these things. And then what they did was painted the picture like that happened. So you already know that it's capable that this could happen.
Yes.
That was the idea. And did they have any hard evidence to actually say they knew about it?
No, they had emails.
Yeah.
They had emails that allegedly came from my father.
Yeah.
But there's a moment that will always forever be ingrained in my mind is our lawyer asked the FBI agent. He said, I just have a quick question. He was like, what process did you go through to authenticate this evidence that it is exactly what you say it is? And the FBI agent goes, I don't know what you're asking. And our lawyer goes, what steps did you take to verify that these emails are what you say they are, that they came from where you say they came from? Because all their evidence came from my dad's former business partner. And the guy asks, the FBI agent goes, well, if you're asking me for a paper trail, I don't have one. And our lawyer goes, so you're telling me you have Quantico at your fingertips? Like, you are the FBI.
Yeah.
You have Quantico at your fingertips, and you didn't go and get these emails authenticated?
Interesting.
They never one time took any step to authenticate any of their evidence. So it could have easily been fabricated. Where did it come from?
Interesting.
And when it comes to the bank fraud, one of our biggest arguments is, where are the loan documents?
Right.
They never one time showed a single loan document at trial.
That's interesting.
All they showed was an Excel spreadsheet of what they say their loss amount is for banks. And this was also during 2008. All these crimes that they're alleging happened were back in 2008. And so this was when there was a banker that got on the stand and testified on that the government called subpoena to testify. And his exact words were, the world was on fire.
Yeah, it was.
Everyone was throwing their loans back at us, saying good luck, defaulting. Like, it was on fire. They said, and while the world was on fire, Mr. Chrisley came to us and said, because there were loans that he had that were legitimate loans.
Sure.
And he said, hey, I want to try to make you as whole as possible. How can we do this? So he didn't just throw the loans back at them.
Yeah.
And that's not someone who's wanting to commit bank fraud.
Yeah.
He said, let me try to make you as whole as possible. Let's do a short sale on this property. He was in the real estate world.
Sure, yeah.
And so even their own witness said he tried to make us as whole as he possibly could.
Interesting. Yeah, because back in 2008, the whole thought that why there's so much regulation now is because there was a lot of looser lending. So banks were lending to companies that shouldn't have been lent to, and they were lending to individuals that couldn't afford to repay. So that's why things are now.
One of the biggest arguments was, your loan renews.
Yeah.
And right now it's more stringent on loan renewals.
Huge,
they need to see all kinds of documentation.
Yeah, it's aggressive. It
wasn't like that back then. It was kind of just like, we gave you the loan originally, so you're fine.
Yeah.
And so they just kept renewing it. So there's so many gray areas that people don't realize until they look into the case. And then when you look into the case, you're like, whoa, this isn't how it should work. And I've said from the beginning, if you can show that my parents are guilty of what you say they're guilty of without a shadow of a doubt, and you have done it ethically and morally, I'm for it.
Gotcha.
I stand for it.
Interesting. Okay. Do you think if they would have pled guilty, their sentences wouldn't have been as extreme as they were?
The government was after them. So they offered my mom 5 years and my dad 15. And so he made out better going to trial. She made out worse because she got 7, he got 12.
Yep. Interesting. The whole thing is interesting. And then the appeal process, how is that going?
So we filed for the appeal. We got granted oral arguments, which happened the week of April 15th, ironically enough, tax day.
Yep. Can't make it up.
You can't
Truly
make it
can't
up.
make it up.
But only 6% of cases get granted oral arguments.
Sure.
So for us, we alleged huge Fourth Amendment violations, which is an illegal seizure that happened.
Okay.
So that was already misconduct by the government. And the IRS agent lying on the stand, the prosecutors withholding evidence that could have proved innocence. And we have all of these things. We asked for evidentiary hearings with the trial judge. She wouldn't give it to us. It was just nothing went in our favor.
Interesting. I saw that you had said that your sister, or there's speculation that you had mentioned your sister helped put them away. A question I would have for you is that true? If so, how? And does the rest of your family all plead their innocence at this point?
Yeah. So to answer the question, yes, it is 110% true. People can look in trial transcripts. They can see. And there has been a lot of public lashing out at each other. I find it funny because her so-called lawyer wants to say that I'm using her as a punching bag for my emotions, which is not true at all because I go off of facts and I go off of, you have interviews that she did with the FBI for 2 years. 2 years. And so I'm going off of the facts of it. And I wholeheartedly believe she was a huge player in this whole fiasco. And it just is what it is. And at this point, I believe that family is not blood. Family can be some of your closest friends. They can be, blood does not mean you are family to someone.
Interesting. Because so essentially what they knew was that there were some gaps in the relationship with her and the government. The family, and so they went to her to try and get information as a result of that. And
out of her anger, bitterness, and resentment for different reasons, she just, if she couldn't have the success everyone else was having, then they weren't going to have it either.
God, there's so many twisted, wild webs weaved in this scenario.
Oh, yes.
We talk money on this podcast, Savannah. If you think about it, if you had to guess, how much money has the family had to commit to this entire process from start to finish of defending everything?
About $7 million.
Oh my goodness gracious.
And I just know what I've spent.
Yeah. And that doesn't impact. Then you also think about brand value and impact. Would the show still be on?
Brand value and impact would be, I think we had an evaluation done and it was like $75 million.
Oh my gosh. So if appeals are ever done and overturned, there's a potential lawsuit here for the ramifications of what occurred. Yeah. There is a lot of action here. Yes. What would you say your biggest takeaway trading secret is, knowing what you've seen in all forms, the deception, the manipulation, the trial process, and where you are today?
I think from a money aspect, it's to prepare for a rainy day, to prepare for it all to end. So you're not sitting, scrambling, worrying, what am I going to do? I think that is the number one most important thing. Play a game of chess. Don't play checkers. Don't just look for the next move. Play a game of chess and think 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, if it all ends. And that's what I wish I would have done. But obviously you can't go back. Yeah. And so now, just from business and business relationships, I've realized that see people for what they are and not what you want them to be. Yeah. And keep people at an arm's length and always protect yourself. Yeah. And from the legal aspect of things, it's just, I grew up in the South. I grew up you bleed our country, red, white, and blue. You respect our police force, all these things, which I do. I am all for the police, even despite what has happened to my family, because I believe as many bad ones as there are, there's also that many good ones. And I hold my faith in the good people in our system. But it's time for an overhaul. And I didn't realize how corrupt our system was until I got involved in it. Because now I have people tell me, oh, you wouldn't be fighting for, criminal justice if it wasn't for your parents. And I say you're 100% right, because I was tone deaf to the system.
Sure.
We normally only care about things that impact us.
Sure.
And now that it impacts me, I know too much to not do something about it.
Yeah.
And so I tell people to open your eyes to something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
And that's been the biggest lesson. So in a way, I'm grateful for it, because now I'm learning. I'm getting to change so many people's lives. I'm in rooms with politicians I never thought I would be in rooms with. I'm getting to a point in my career to where I feel like it's about to just take off, but I'm going to have a lot of people hate me in the next few months with some things that I'm getting ready to do.
Take off.
Yeah. So I'm going to have a lot of people hate me, but I'm going to have a lot of people love me.
What are you getting ready to do?
At the end of February, I'm speaking at a very big event in DC.
Are you getting into politics?
I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm dabbling in it in certain areas.
Okay.
Because I like to tell people, obviously when it comes to, you look at my background, not the most educated human being in the world when it comes to actually, degrees and things of that nature.
Sure.
But I've chosen to take my experience with our justice system and educate myself. Okay. And I spend tons of time doing that, especially when it comes to our prison system and my parents being there now. I speak about how broken our system is and how it is utilized as a means to just destroy people.
What's the number one thing that's broken about it?
Well, on your podcast, since it's a money,
sure,
we're going to come at it from, because I that's what I like to say is I'm coming at it from a people perspective. Okay. It's not a left or right issue. It's about people and human life and loving people well. And we don't do that. All we do is just take away any self-esteem they have. But when you're looking at it from a financial perspective, you look at, in our federal prison system, there's 125 federal prisons. There are, the Office of Inspector General came out with a report that stated all 125 facilities were in need of upwards of $2 billion worth of repairs. $2 billion worth of repairs. And Congress gave them $60 million for repairs. But also the annual budget for the BOP is, I want to say it is $9 billion. $9 billion. What are we doing with that money? And now there was a report that just came out by Cory Booker, and it states the First Step Act, which was implemented under the Trump administration. And it was the first act in decades to do anything with prison reform. Anything. Democrat, Republican, Trump made leaps and bounds when it came to prison reform. But the BOP doesn't know how to implement the First Step Act. And the First Step Act, it allows nonviolent offenders to enter back into society in a safer manner. So therefore, it takes time off their sentences if they complete certain classes, all these different things. Okay. And the BOP doesn't know how to calculate those credits. So there are men and women who have been sitting in prison for 6 months to a year longer than they ever should have. So we falsely imprison them, and it's cost taxpayers $140 million.
Wow.
So you look at that and you're like, we falsely imprison these men and women. It's costing us $140 million. But yet we have a government who's saying we're trillions of dollars in debt. Well, look at what are we doing to fix it?
Where are the numbers going?
We're not doing anything to fix it. And there's no one to hold these sectors of government accountable.
Insert Savannah.
Hey, I wish. No, wow. I just think partnering with certain political figures is going to be the key, because they have the education, they have the experience. I'm coming from a personal place of saying, hey, I've seen this firsthand. Because a lot of these politicians, they don't know. Sure. They don't know what it's like inside a federal prison. They don't know that our taxpayer dollars are going to feed these men and women food that expired back in 2019 and it's now 2024. They don't know that they don't have clean drinking water, that there's black mold, there's all these different things.
Passionate about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is, we could do a whole podcast on this whole, so we could go
just the government
down
waste, just
the rabbit hole right here.
Just the money is sickening when you look into it, and the waste, and our taxpayer dollars are paying for it.
Yeah. I think that, the idea, I think in general, the idea of understanding where tax paying dollars are going, how they're going there, why they're going there, and the systems of accountability that are put in place to keep things equitable for humans that are in prison is very important. And so that is a long journey. Keep pushing through your passions and keep going there. But the last thing I got to get back to before we wrap up with you, because it's something we haven't talked about, is now on top of potentially being a politician, a reality star, a podcast host, an entrepreneur, a real estate agent and owner of an agency, and I'm sure I'm missing a few, you're also a parent. You have custody now of two. So talk to me a little bit about just, first of all, there's the mental aspect, but the finances. How are you paying for everything that they're undergoing? Is there a trust set up? Are your parents somehow helping out? How is that being done?
No, it's all through me.
So your earnings are paying for them right now. In every which way.
Yep, 100%. And that's why I say it's like, I am a hustler. I am no better than anyone else out here to have to work 3 or 4 jobs. Like, I will do whatever comes my way. Just before we sat down to do this podcast, I was sitting at the coffee shop with my real estate partner right next door, sending out emails to clients, looking at like sending them houses, getting on the phone. I was sitting there before I came up to do this.
Yeah.
And then when I leave here, I'm going to go back to the coffee shop, work on more real estate, go work out, take the 11-year-old to therapy, and then start all over again tomorrow.
Are you having financial hardship with all this burden?
You know what? Of course it's not easy because you look at it and you're like, all right, I want to give these 2 kids the best life possible. Chloe's in a private Christian school. Grayson, he's in a private Christian school, does online schooling. But it's still, you got to pay that tuition.
Are you taking like debt out for this? Are you like going into debt by taking care of them? You doing it all on your side?
I just do it all on my own, and I just work. And I say that's why my faith is a huge thing to me, because there are times where it's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like there are times where I've broken down. It's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Yeah. And God provides just when I need it.
Interesting.
So I look at it and I'm like, you know what? Like God's going to, he's going to pave a way for me. He's going to allow certain successes to come into my life. And I just have to have that faith to keep me moving.
One success I heard about, and I always listen to podcasts like my guests do to hear what they say and how they say it. And on the Vial Files, I heard you had made a quick comment about Special Forces, the paycheck.
Yes.
I had someone on in Special Forces talk about the paycheck. We had to take it out. We got in trouble with Fox, so I'm not going to go there. But I know it's a nice payday.
Yes.
But you were only there for 3 days. So I have to ask you, or just a couple days, was part of your process like get that check and get out?
Well,
given the cost you have right now.
I would have stayed longer if there was like the paycheck was great, but like if there was a winning prize, I would have stayed. Okay. But in my mind, it was so hard because this was, we were still getting used to mom and dad being gone, and I had the kids full time, and I don't have, my grandparents are so much older. So thinking of going across the world and leaving these 2 kids, if there was an emergency, I don't have my phone. I had so much anxiety just about leaving them. And I got paid the same, whether I stayed or I didn't,
So I was like, move for you.
Yeah, it was a business move. And I was like, if I would have had a huge jackpot at the end, you could have beat me. I don't care. I would have stayed. But there wasn't. You got paid the same regardless.
Hustler. Yeah. Got a hustler in your blood. Would you say our earnings back to where they were at one point? Are we feeling good about that?
They're getting there. Okay. You have your highs and lows. Yeah. I kind of get worried just about moving forward and stances I take, and you just never know, but at the end of the day, I'm less concerned about the dollar amount than I am about who I am especially with the kids. It's so important for me to show them that it doesn't matter how much money you lose, as long as you stand firm in your convictions and who you are, and no amount of money is worth changing who you are as a person and what you believe in. Yeah,
I think that's a great lesson. I was going to ask you, and maybe that's the answer, and this is probably the last question before I get your trading secret, is just through everything you've undergone, which is a whole lot, we've named a bunch of that, what is it that keeps you resilient? How haven't you broken completely?
I think for me, I look at this experience with my parents, and I just have so much fight in me, and I know what it feels like to love people so much. And instead of breaking, I'm like, hey, like, I'm going to fight for them. I'm going to fight for them like they fought for me my whole life. And so I've taken it as an opportunity to educate myself and I'm on the phone with lawyers all the time. I think that's my why. Like, my parents are my why, because I know I'm going to see it through for them to come home sooner than later. Yeah. And also the kids. I feel like, obviously, your 20s, it's so easy to be like selfish and self-absorbed, and you're worried about your life and what you're doing. And me getting the kids, like, for the first time in my life, I love two individuals more than I love myself. So everything I do, and I realize that what you leave behind are kids. Yeah. And people tend to forget about the younger generations and how much of an impact they leave on this world, but they're the most impactful right now. And so teaching them and guiding them through life, I have so much to live for. So why not accept little wins and just live life?
And it's kind of like you started this podcast off talking about, like, the functioning depression. It feels as though everything that's happened your way, regardless of how tragic it is, whether it causes depression, anxiety, or fear, what's differentiated you is the functioning aspect.
For sure.
These things happen, and then they drive what's next. They actually function to a level higher than you functioned before because them happening.
And that's what I try to find the positive in every negative situation. Yeah. Because, like, if it wasn't for my parents going to prison, I would not be, like I said, I wouldn't be sitting in rooms with former presidents and congressmen and just the people that I've been surrounded with. And now I have the potential to make lasting impact. And my goal is to be testifying in front of Congress. So to be in my 20s testifying in front of Congress about something I'm so passionate about, in a way, it's like, hey, God, thank you for allowing this to happen, because now I can impact millions of people's lives and not just my family's.
Okay, we've seen your charge. You want to be testifying. You want to be doing what you're doing. You're working every day to make a change. Crystal ball, last question I got before trading secrets. Your dad is set to be released January 2033. Your mother, Julie, October 2028. Crystal ball, do they get out before then?
100%.
100%.
100%.
That is with conviction. I will not take
no for an answer.
Wow.
Like I said, you play a game of chess, not checkers.
All right.
So I've got option 1, option 2, option 3 of how we achieve what we need to achieve.
All right, Savannah, you are coming back on when your prediction is correct. But until then, we got to get your trading secret. So it's a trading secret that no one can get in a textbook, learn from a professor, on a TikTok tutorial or YouTube channel. They can only learn from your wild career, financial, and life journey. It's one trading secret with Savannah Chrisley. What can you leave us?
Oh, gosh. For me, it's just like, our government's not what you say it is. Do your research. Look into it. I think that's the biggest, like, did you know that if you report someone for tax fraud, you get 30 to 50% of what the government collects?
Interesting.
Like, it's stuff like that, like...
So it's almost like your trading secret is that behind what we think is the norm or what we just assume is reality, there are many trading secrets we don't know, and we need to do a deep dive and understand them.
Yeah, I think for us as humans, it's easier to take what someone tells you as being the gospel, the truth. It is what it is. But in reality, you do your research behind it, and nothing is ever as it seems.
Sure.
And so for me, I've learned when someone says something, I'm going to do my research. I'm going to look up the numbers. And at the end of the day, numbers don't lie.
Yep.
So you have to do your research behind things. You can't be so trusting of people. People like to say I'm jaded, but I say no. Yep. Like, people are too trusting. And I think it's so hard because this whole thing has taught me things that I just put a video on Instagram and I'm like conspiracy theorist times 5 million. But like, it's kind of as some say conspiracy theorist, I now know a lot of things is the truth. So it's just so hard that I think it's just don't be trusting of people. Like, do your research. Don't take people's word as the gospel.
Yeah.
And then you'll know. You show up with numbers and facts, and you can argue anyone.
Numbers don't lie. I love that saying. And I think my trading secret from this episode is it's kind of systems in place for checks and balances, right?
Yes.
So like you have to have 3 or 4 layers of protection because anyone out there, if you're assuming it's getting done by the one person, if they're manipulating or moving things in a different way, what system do you have to keep them accountable?
Exactly.
And the more layers you put in place, the less this happens. Like if you think about your dad's situation, this guy that was committing the fraud, if there was another way to have 4 different checks in place,
this would have never happened.
He was been held accountable, none of this happens. Or at least it's brought to fruition and then it's dealt with.
Exactly.
So that's a big one, is like, fine, if you have trust in people, that's great. Put systems in place so that they know that there's people watching. In a basic one, I'll give one right now. You have a CPA, you have a financial manager. They have to be interconnected, right? Making sure that all the numbers align. There's just so many ways to do it. So Savannah, this has been an unbelievable episode. Your journey has been remarkable. I can't wait for that movie to come out. We'll see if your prediction's right. When and if it's right, you are coming back on the show.
Done.
And it sounds like you might be moving into politics, so we'll keep an eye out on that, but I'm just assuming you didn't say that. Where can everyone follow you and see what you have going on so they can see what comes to fruition?
Yes, so my podcast is Unlocked with Savannah. You can find it on any podcast platform, also YouTube. You can find full videos, and we do some one-off videos on YouTube under the Unlocked podcast that aren't on podcast apps. So we kind of keep it fun. And then Instagram is Savannah Chrisley. Also TikTok, have that too.
Spoiler.
We're just going to utilize it better. We have two of them, Unlocked and Savannah.
And next episode, she'll be making a lot more money on her social media because we're going to bring it to her. Savannah, thank you for being on this episode of Trading Secrets.